All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is my sincere pleasure in welcoming you to Washington, D.C. I am Muriel Bowser, and I am the mayor of the nation's capital. We are always pleased to welcome mayors from around our nation who put in the work for their constituents each and every day and who do not have the luxury of not acting. And I'm pleased to be here with them. Let me begin by also offering my sincerest thoughts and prayers to the passengers, first responders, crew, and the families of those aboard Amtrak 188 that derailed last night in Philadelphia. I have been in regular contact with Mayor Nutter since last night, and members of my team have as well. He assures me that he has the resources that he needs and that all the appropriate local, state, and federal agencies are on the scene as part of the rescue and recovery mission. We, of course, know that the NTSB is on site as well, investigating the accident. As you all know, Train 188 originated in Washington, D.C. at Union Station, and we know that there are many D.C. residents on board. I am, however, not in a position to read out how many people were on board or the status of any of the residents. While we don't know what the causes were of last night's accident, we do know that investing in our infrastructure is critically important each and every day in cities across our nation. I want to thank Mayor de Blasio and all of the mayors present for their support and their call to Congress to increase federal transportation investment. Transportation connects our cities, and the transportation infrastructure is what unites us. As we work tirelessly every day in Washington to create pathways to the middle class for our residents, we do it by improving schools, attracting new businesses, and building affordable housing. But our cities can only thrive, our cities will only grow if we continue and increase investment to our infrastructure. Investment creates economic opportunity, it supports our utilities, and it will allow freight to move easily throughout our country. That is why it is important that the federal government fulfills its commitment, fulfills its obligation to our nation in keeping it competitive and strong. Under the current Federal Transportation Authorization Bill, moving ahead for progress in the 21st century, or MAP 21, the District of Columbia receives 2/3 of its annual capital spend for surface transportation. And that would all go away on May 31st if the Congress doesn't act. Without a fix for the Highway Trust Fund, we risk even more of a strain on our local resources and our capacity to keep up with the growth of our city and our region. So I have a single message for the Congress: expand MAP 21 now. Washington, D.C. is growing rapidly. This region is growing rapidly, and we need these investments to stay competitive. We are home to America's subway system, and we need our federal partners to live up to their commitment to make sure that district residents, visitors, and federal employees have access to safe and reliable public transportation. We need to invest in these critical projects, including our bridges, like the H Street Bridge in Washington, D.C., which will create economic opportunities for D.C. and this region because of its vital connections: Metro, MARC, Amtrak, and the D.C. streetcar service. And it is at the crossroads of our city. I stand here with mayors from across our nation who agree a strong federal partnership is imperative to strengthening our transportation infrastructures. I want to thank President Obama and his administration for understanding the call from mayors around the nation and his desire to work with cities to increase long-term federal funding. So again, thank you to Mayor de Blasio and to all the mayors. And I want to turn it over to New York City's mayor now.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Mayor Bowser, thank you for your leadership, and I think if anyone deserves the title America's Mayor, it's the mayor of our nation's capital. We thank you for your great leadership. It is a sober day. It's a difficult day. And I know for all of us, our thoughts and prayers are with the families of those lost in the Amtrak crash and those injured. And for those of us who live on that train line from Washington through Philly up to New York, it's very personal for all of us. We've all taken that train, and so many family members do as well. And I said earlier, this is a wake-up call. It's a reminder of how much we depend on our mass transit, how much we depend on our roads and bridges, how much our safety is directly linked to the kind of investments we make and how we get around. That's what has brought us all here. It's a painful coincidence that we stand here just hours after this crash, but we have been working for weeks and months to gather this day, knowing that the day at the end of this month will be a decisive one for this nation, when the Highway Trust Fund will either run out or move forward. And what I have seen just in the last 24 hours, my fellow mayors and I, we have gone all over Capitol Hill. We've met with our congressional delegations from our states, but we've also had the great honor of meeting with some of the key figures who will determine the fate of transportation in this nation. Chair Inhofe, Chair Schuster, some of the key Democratic leaders in the Senate, including Senator Reid, Senator Schumer, Senator Durbin, Senator Stabenow, and Senator Murray. A number of members of our delegation met with Leader Pelosi. So we're crisscrossing the Capitol to get a message across from the grassroots that only here in Washington can we get the decision we need to move our cities and our nation forward and to invest in our infrastructure. It is literally a decisive moment in American history because as a nation, we know we have been falling behind. Every one of my colleagues can talk about the examples they have of infrastructure that's starting to fail or is intensely insufficient. And when you put that in the context of not just safety of our people or the strength of our local economies, but when you put it in the context of our ability to compete in a globalized world, our nation's ability to compete economically, all the indicators point to one thing: you only can move forward if you invest. We know our competitors are investing. United States, strongest nation on the earth, puts 1.7% of its GDP into infrastructure. Europe puts 5% of their GDP. China puts 9% of their GDP into infrastructure investments. Is it any wonder that our competitors are starting to outdistance us economically? We can't let it happen. And here in these next 18 days, the decisions will be made that will frame our future. Now look, we all are united on a simple set of ideas, and this is a delegation of mayors from all over this country, every region. Mayors from both parties. This has been a profoundly bipartisan effort, and I think for all of us that's gratifying. We know three simple things. We need a long-term transportation bill, a 6-year bill that we can plan around and that will save money for the taxpayers if that planning can be done and not hand to mouth year to year. We need a more robust bill than what we've seen in recent years. It's been 7 years of flat funding. If we don't change that situation, we could go over a decade with literally no movement in the level of funding while inflation moves ahead, costs increase, and our infrastructure gets weaker. And we all believe in what's called localization. We all believe that if the resources come into our cities, we guarantee the money will be spent well and quickly because our constituents walk right up to us and demand it. Everyone's nodding their heads because we all know it. Simple vision of how we move forward. And actually, I'm proud to say that in a lot of the meetings, we actually are hearing a lot of agreement from both sides of the aisle here on the broad outline of what has to happen. This is a bipartisan group, but it's not just mayors. We are working with our colleagues in the business community. We're working with local chambers of commerce. We're working with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We're working with farm organizations. We're working with labor. And there is an extraordinary unity on this issue you find on few others, and that gives us hope. By the way, we have mayors from some of the biggest cities, we have mayors from smaller cities and towns, and there's absolute unity. This is not a red issue or a blue issue. There's no red or blue highway. If ever there was a red, white, and blue issue, it's this one. This is in the interest of all of us. I'm going to bring forward some of my colleagues who are going to tell you what they experience on the ground in their cities. I like to talk about the over 100 bridges in my city that are over 100 years old as one example of what we face in New York City. But you're going to hear each and every one of the colleagues who speak talk about their particular challenge. There's so many that we've just chosen a core cross-section, Democrats and Republicans, to speak, but I want to acknowledge those who are not speaking initially. I want to welcome, of course, in the Q&A, any who want to step forward to come forward. But let me just do this quickly and thank Mayor Thomas Armstrong of Grimes, Iowa, Mayor Ralph Becker of Salt Lake City, Utah, Mayor Virgil Bernero of Lansing, Michigan, Mayor Christopher Cabaldon of West Sacramento, California, Mayor William Carpenter of Brockton, Massachusetts, Mayor J.M. Skip Conkling of Altoona, Iowa, Mayor Joy Cooper of Hallandale Beach, Florida, Mayor John Giles of Mesa, Arizona, Mayor Hardy Davis of Augusta, Georgia, Mayor Kevin Dumas of Attleboro, Massachusetts, Mayor Jorge Alorza of Providence, Rhode Island, Mayor Christopher Coos of Normal, Illinois, Mayor Stephanie Miner of Syracuse, New York, Mayor Kenneth, Miyagishima of Las Cruces, New Mexico, Mayor Ed Pawlowski of Allentown, Pennsylvania, Mayor Laurel Prussing of Urbana, Illinois, Mayor Jeffrey Slavin of Somerset, Maryland, Mayor Nan Whaley of Dayton, Ohio, Mayor Dawn Zimmer of Hoboken, New Jersey, and Mayor Edna Jackson of Savannah, Georgia. If that's not a cross-section of the United States of America, Democrat and Republican, give them all a round of applause. And I was honored to co-author today an op-ed in the New York Times which summarizes how powerful the challenge is, and we want it to be abundantly clear. This affects all of us. It affects New York City, it affects Oklahoma City, it affects so many cities. And I was honored to join with my good friend, the mayor of Oklahoma City, Mick Cornett. Mayor.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We stand here today collectively as members of the United States Conference of Mayors. We represent people throughout the United States in medium-sized cities and the largest of cities. We also know that we have a priority and a responsibility of protecting the public safety and the economies of our local communities. Every day in America, lives are lost and productivity is lessened because of an inadequate system of infrastructure. It's underfunded. The deferred maintenance that continues to pile up in this system should scare everyone who hears this message. Now, when you get to Washington, people say, that sounds good, Mayor, but how are you going to pay for it? You don't have to tell us about tough choices. We're mayors. We deal in real-life practicalities. We live in balanced budgets. But we also know it's about priorities. At the end of the day, what do you think's important? And we stand here collectively today telling Washington as loudly as we can, infrastructure funding is important. We need the people of America to call their elected leaders in Washington and insist that they prioritize infrastructure spending and stop the buildup of the deferred maintenance that is plaguing this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next mayor is a witness to what happens when infrastructure is not supported. In her city of Minneapolis, one of the most dramatic examples, the collapse of the bridge over the Mississippi River in 2007. Mayor Betsy Hodges of Minneapolis.
On August 1st, 2007, I was a city council member and I was on my way to a public safety meeting in one of my neighborhoods when I got a call from one of our deputy chiefs. She told me the 35W bridge has collapsed into the Mississippi River. To this day, I can remember the distinct disorientation that brought. Because as my senior senator said at the time, bridges don't just fall down in America, except now they do. Except now they do. In my role on the city council, it was then my job to take leaders there every day as they were still doing rescue and eventually when they were doing recovery, so that the state and federal officials could see exactly what had been wrought in the Mississippi River and had been wrought from a collapsed bridge that day. There were expressions of horror, expressions of grief, each and every one of them genuine. In the end, there were 13 people dead, there were 145 people injured, 111 vehicles, all lost that day on that bridge. And there were promises made that this would never happen again, and it has. There were promises made that we will fund what it takes to make sure every bridge and every road in this country is safe and well tended. That is a promise yet unfulfilled. There is the opportunity right now to fulfill that promise. There is the opportunity right now to make sure that an accident, an event that has no meaning, that was completely senseless, there is the opportunity to even attempt to give some meaning to it by having learned the lesson that the infrastructure in America needs investment, or the infrastructure in America will fall apart at the seams. And we have seen it up close and personal, and I have seen it up close and personal. We need to invest in the long term, and there's the opportunity in Congress right now to make that decision, or this will happen again and again and again. We need to invest long term, or there will be lives lost again and again. There will be highways shut down because bridges collapse, costing millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue, hundreds of millions of dollars in lost business, and inability of people to get to their jobs and their workplaces. The unthinkable will become commonplace if we do not invest long-term in our infrastructure in the United States of America. Unless we have the leadership to move forward, the only leadership that will be happening is that we will be devising strategies about how to explain to people how we got here, how to explain people why the bridge fell down in their city. Instead, what we need is explaining to people how we're going to make sure that no bridge ever falls down again. Thank you.
Thank you. As the mayors will attest, we're in a country that is becoming ever more urbanized. The cities are increasingly the core of our economy. The demands on our infrastructure is growing. It's not just aging infrastructure, the demand is growing. And one mayor who can really attest to it, because his city has become more and more popular as a national and international business capital, is Mayor Tomas Regalado of Miami. Mayor.
Well, the mayor said that I came from the second most popular city in the U.S. But as mayor, we have done what we are expected to do. We increase services. We travel around the world to bring investment, and we have done. In the last 3 years, I'm very proud to say that we have brought 48,000 new residents to the core of downtown, 2 museums, 1 museum park, a new venue for performing arts, and of course, hundreds of thousands of people that work and live and play in the core of downtown Miami. So how do we move these people? Last week, we were talking about a light rail project, and we were told by consultants that this project would have to wait between 7 to 10 years to get on the list for transportation dollars. We need Congress to do their job because we are doing our jobs. So I'm here standing with you, Mayor, and all my colleagues throughout the United States to tell Congress that they need to give the cities flexibility. After all, we are the front line of the people. We need more money for infrastructure. We need to move people around. We cannot afford our workers in downtown that have to spend 2.5 hours on a driving time to get to work and go back home every day. So, Congress, it's about time that you hear the voices. We're far from Washington, but we are part of this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, nowhere in our nation is more synonymous with highway challenges than Southern California. And one of our colleagues at the front line of trying to deal with all of the challenges created by a community that depends so deeply on automobiles but continues to grow with just the infrastructure it has. It's my honor to introduce Mayor Tom Tate of Anaheim, California.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks. Greetings from the West Coast. Anaheim is a city of about 350,000 people. We're the largest city in Orange County, 3.5 million people. Orange County gets about 40 million visitors a year. Our freeways are clogged. They're clogged. They're choking off the growth of Orange County, of Anaheim, Orange County, of all Southern California. We have, there's a freeway near my home at 6 o'clock in the morning. If you go out, that freeway is jammed. It is causing not just economic problems, but social problems. Many people have an hour and a half, 2 hours commute each way. That takes away from their time with their family, with their friends, with their community. It takes away, I believe, it takes away from the social infrastructure, which is equally as important as the physical infrastructure. But the social infrastructure depends on the physical infrastructure. And that's what's at risk in addition to the commerce. So what we need on behalf of these mayors, bipartisan, actually with mayors nonpartisan, is a long-term fix from Congress. And that's what we're asking for, and we're asking for it now. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Two more speakers. One is a mayor from a particularly relevant state at this moment in our history, and I think he is a very popular guy right now. He runs the biggest city in the state that's on everyone's mind, and he knows a lot about what we need to do to change and invest in our cities. The mayor of Des Moines, Iowa, Frank County.
You know, here we all are, mayors. Every single day, we listen to our citizens, as has been expressed by so many of us, about what needs to happen. There's a hole in front of my house. You got to fix it. They're not waiting for a bill to pass this year, next year, the year after. They want it done today. And so we have to respond to those kinds of things, whether it's in front of one of our citizens' houses or downtown business or in our whole area. As I look at Des Moines, Iowa, and I think about what's going on, and you hear about tragedies that have happened around this country, and our hearts go out to those people in Pennsylvania that were headed towards Philadelphia, and to those families that have been part of the tragedy that happened on I-35 in 2007. In Des Moines, Iowa, we've got 65 bridges that go over rivers. We're a town of rivers. 40 of those are either structurally deficient or functionally obsolete, a few of which are going to be closed down because we can't get the funding that's necessary to do the work to keep them open, and we want to keep our citizens safe. We can't turn our backs on this. We need a bill. We need a bill now. We can't kick the can on down the road and hope that 24 months from now or 36 months from now something happens. Our citizens in this country need action today, and we've been talking to our representatives across this country, and we think that we have a number of those that agree with us, and let's see if we can't get something to happen. Thank you.
Amen. Well done. And this is about an agenda for how we strengthen our cities for the future, and there's literally, I would say, no one in America understands more profoundly what it means to have a meaningful urban agenda in Washington. He saw early in his career what that looked like and how it actually functioned, and he's seen what it means when we don't have it, but he's kept fighting throughout. The CEO and Executive Director of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Tom Cochrane.
This year, Japan celebrated its 50th anniversary of the bullet train. We don't have one here. This press conference is a rarity. We come to Washington on a number of issues, social issues. This press conference is a rarity. We're coming on a highway bill, a transportation bill. We should not even be here. We shouldn't be here fighting for this. I have, as you know, Mr. Mayor, associations with organizations like mine around the world. The German Conference of Mayors, Japanese Conference of Mayors. I sit, we talk, we drink, right? And I said, and I tell them, I said, you know, we have to go fight for mass transit. They don't have to fight. They don't have to fight. They just call somebody in Beijing and stuff goes up, okay? They don't have to fight in Germany. It's taken for granted. If something is wrong with Paris, France rallies. France rallies. What about us, okay? We're sitting here in this, and before this Congress, and we're telling them this is not our last trip. We're going to fight like we're supposed to fight, and we've done it before. Next month in San Francisco, mayors will come together at our 83rd annual meeting, and this will be a top priority. And I want to let you all know that Mayor Kevin Johnson, our president, and the mayor of Atlanta, Kasim Reed, who's our chair of Transportation Committee, Mayor de Blasio, and others, we will be there with Mayor Lee. We want everyone in the media to know this is not a one-shot deal. We're going to stay with it through the summer, through the winter, until we get a transportation bill. Thank you very much.
Well done. In a moment, we're going to take questions on this topic, but two important points. I want everyone to understand that this is a profoundly bipartisan coalition, so just the speakers that you have heard. Mayor Bowser and I happen to be Democrats. Mayor Cornett happens to be a Republican. Mayor Hodges is a Democrat. Mayor Regalado is a Republican. Mayor Tate is a Republican. Mayor County is a Democrat. And we are all working together in common cause. And you should see in these meetings how we could complete each other's sentences because we live the same reality and we believe the same things need to be done for our cities in this country. One more quick point, 3 sentences in Spanish, and then we will take questions on topic. Hoy, alcaldes de todo el país han pedido al Congreso que provea más fondos para transporte. Todos dependemos de nuestras calles, puentes, autobuses y trenes para movernos de un lado a otro. Debemos invertir en infraestructura para proteger el futuro de nuestras ciudades y nuestro país. With that, we welcome your questions.
The first comes from Jill Jorgensen, who is on the train.
Yes, and we hear she's okay, right?
She is okay with a beat up.
Thank God.
She's all right. And she asks, are any of you planning on supporting positive train control and working with Congress? They've already required.
Right, it's something, I mean, I can just say and welcome my colleagues on this. From a New York perspective, absolutely. I know that's being worked on with Metro North, and it's something we need. It's not part of the transportation bill we're talking about here, but it's something I absolutely support.
The second question is actually, Rep. Steve Israel just introduced an amendment today seeking increased transportation funding for Amtrak, which just died in committee about an hour ago. Is there any anger, I guess?
Well, the mayor who's led the charge for mayors all around the country on the issues of Amtrak is Mayor Cornett, so let me have him speak to it.
No, I think the lack of support for Amtrak is outrageous. It's clear that America's people would like to move by passenger trail. There are cities and towns all over the country that have no access to Amtrak. I don't know of a single city out there that thinks they have too much. Yet every time Amtrak funding comes up, there seems to be another priority that's more important. Those that are against increased Amtrak funding are not listening to the people in America, because Americans have spoken. They want passenger rail in this country.
Exactly right.
New York and the DC mayors, have you been able at this point to get any estimate from Amtrak about how long your cities are going to be cut off from each other because of this accident, and how concerned are you about what long-term impacts this will have in regards to commerce between your two cities?
Well, we know, and I couldn't agree more with the mayor. And in fact, what we have seen on the Northeast corridor between Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, and Boston is actually increased ridership at Amtrak. And a lot of a heavy increase usage. So we know that the investments with Amtrak for the state of the ridership now have to be improved, but also looking to the future to accommodate growing ridership on Amtrak, and it has to be made, and it has to be made now. So we expect to get Amtrak up and running between our cities just as soon as possible. I know that everybody is engaged in making sure that the site is being investigated, the cause is being determined, and rescue and recovery efforts are underway safely.
Based on what we saw today, it doesn't appear that increased funding for rail is coming anytime soon. So what's the alternative to help make people safer? What's plan B?
Well, I think we have to think about what this opportunity before us now with the highway bill creates in terms of the larger issue. All of us are united in changing the rules of the game here in Washington when it comes to the transportation bill. We're not going to allow the same old in which these bills are short-term extensions, no increases in funds, no ability to plan. And I think that is also going to have an impact on how we think about the other elements of infrastructure like Amtrak. The bottom line here is we're literally stuck as a country. Practically speaking, we're stuck because the infrastructure keeps aging. As we're having this press conference, our city's infrastructures are aging, certainly our rail system as well. But I think on the highway bill, we have a chance for a breakthrough. And what we heard when meeting with members of the House and Senate from both sides of the aisle is there's a growing recognition here there's a need for a long-term bill. That's progress. There's a growing recognition that it has to be a more robust bill. That is progress. There's certainly a recognition that localization and letting us bring the projects through to fruition and make a difference. So I want to believe if we can get something to happen here on the transportation bill, it also will be part of how we fix the rail situation. On topic, anything else on your mind? I'm sorry, go ahead, Sally.
The pressuring the federal government, is there anything you can do locally, either in New York City or in concert with Albany, like any taxes or any other programs you can do to raise funding for transportation?
Look, I think, and some of my colleagues may want to comment on their experiences, it's interesting that in a number of states, there have been very positive efforts to address these issues. And some of them have included additional revenue. And in fact, the voters of those states have often blessed that because they want roads and bridges and rail that works. I think in our case, obviously we've had a situation in Albany recently where there were surplus funds, and I think they needed to be devoted more to things like the MTA, as I've said. But the fact is, even if our states are doing the maximum, the ultimate action is here in Washington. And that's not to let our state governments off the hook, but let's put the horse before the cart. This is where the real change can be made. Everyone may have a different view on what that increase should be. Let's take the example the president has put forward, which is a very constructive proposal. 6 years, $80 billion a year. Would be a game changer for all of our cities. Literally every city here would be changed and would benefit if that particular vision came forward or anything even close to it. So there's no way our states can reach that kind of level. But our federal government used to. In the past, transportation bills were often increased as much as 40% in a given cycle to acknowledge the needs of a growing economy and a growing nation. And that's what I think we want to get back to. Does anyone else want to add on? Mayor Becker of Salt Lake City.
Hi, afternoon. I'm Mayor Ralph Becker of Salt Lake City, also president of the National League of Cities. Let me just give you one direct experience this year. The state of Utah, which is not known as being this liberal bastion of the country, this year passed 2 measures to address our transportation needs. The first was it raised gas tax and it indexed that gas tax, so it continues to rise with inflation and the cost of gas. The second was it provided for a local option sales tax for local transportation needs, transit and roads, cities, counties, and transit. If a state like Utah, which is as conservative as any state in the country and faces the same dynamics as some of our friends here in Congress, can step up to the plate and make the investments we know we need for the future, Congress should be able to do it too. I'll get you those numbers. I mean, I could give you numbers for my city, but I think you probably want numbers that are statewide. So, but it'll make a huge difference for us in our infrastructure needs. There's no question about it. But it is not a substitute for a national funding program.
Which reminds me of a phrase we use in New York: if you can make it happen in Utah, you can make it happen anywhere. It's a common phrase in our city. All right, last call. Anything on this topic, Jen? I think this is absolutely, I'm very, very sad. We're all deeply pained by this accident. And again, the bill we're working on is not about Amtrak. It is about highways, roads, bridges, mass transit, but obviously it is a kindred area. Now look, I think I can editorialize, and if anyone wants to think differently, please come forward. But I think every single one of my colleagues, Democrat and Republican, every region of the country, we feel obligated to go where we can make an impact for our people. Every one of us comes to Washington because that's where the resources are. And that's where we can make a difference. Every single one of us gathers with our fellow mayors, and Tom Cochran can attest that's been happening for decades since who started the U.S. Conference of Mayors? Fiorello LaGuardia. When the Depression hit and there was a need for mayors to be a unified voice to achieve change in Washington that would help our cities. This is not a new thing. So I think every time any one of us goes on those missions, we're not shocked if some people say, you know, how can you be out of town? And the answer is we're out of town to serve our people because this is where the resources are. The only person that doesn't get that criticism is Muriel Bowser. Okay, that's right, unless she's in New York talking to the banks, right? No. Last call, any questions? Okay, well, yes, sir.
Can you tell us that you know about victims from the train who are New York City residents?
We're waiting for clarification. I understand that families have not been notified in many cases, so we're waiting. It's a very tragic situation, and obviously we fear that some of them may have been New York City residents, but we haven't gotten confirmation. Okay. As I know what you know, excessive speed appears to be the underlying reason, but why excessive speed was being utilized, we've seen different reasons for that in the past, so I don't want to speculate. What I do know is it's a reminder of how vital our infrastructure is to our health and safety, and that's why we're all here today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.